Hello everyone, my name is Anvashima and I'm a career ambassador working for the CCD. Today I'm here with Jason Miraka. Jason, could you please give us an introduction about yourself? So name, college, major, graduation year at BU, and your current occupation.
Of course. My name is Jason Miraka. I studied at BU from 2020 to 2023. I majored in international relations with the focus on foreign policy and European studies. And I also double majored in economics. Currently not doing either of those fields. I actually work for a healthcare software company as a project manager and sort of like an implementation consultant.
Thank you. So, what experience was the most valuable to you in college, or what was the biggest takeaway you had from college?
I feel like as much as I sucked while like in school, I would say a lot of those team projects are very helpful, in the sense that you sort of develop the soft skills when it comes to dealing with people. At least in my field, like we're very project based. So, and especially in my role, like I'm working with people not only on my specific team, but across different applications, 'cause all for this one customer. And of course, you're working with customers and analysts who are sometimes twice your age and very experienced. So you have to find, I think college and university life gives you that practice to talking to people and knowing how to navigate that myriad of personalities that you run into.
No, yeah, 100%. I'm also familiar with like people in like Questrom or as you said, like IR or even poli-sci, like in a lot of those cases, they have a lot of like group projects or a lot of presentations. So they'll like be collaborating with a lot of other students and kind of maybe like coming into contact with students even from other majors sometimes if it's a hub class as
Mhm.
well and kind
Right.
of trying to adapt to the situation or even like a deadline or something. Um, and is the coursework you completed at BU directly applicable to your current position? Would you say that? If not, what would you recommend students do to prepare for an entry-level position in this industry?
Yeah, so I think unless you're studying something like computer science, engineering, anything that's technical, I I there's a very good chance that you'll be working in a field that has nothing to do with what your major. Of course, you have students who major in poli sci and international relations and then end up working in government. But a lot of us, will graduate and not know what the next step is, or we just want to get a job. But I do think that the liberal arts prepare you in a way that they teach us a lot about critical thinking. Like think about all those hours you spent researching, writing papers, working with other students. I think some of those some of those soft skills can come very handy when you're working in any field, whether it's consulting or yeah, I would probably say like consulting because you need to have those research skills, being able to follow up on deadlines and having great organizational skills. Also, I mean, you're currently in college, you have all those classes that you need to keep up with and all those deadlines. And I think something that's also very useful, you mentioned those like hub requirements, like um, it's good to like get different perspectives when you're in college because again, you could be working in a career or in a field that has nothing to do with the the major or track you were studying in college, but just that exposure of working with different people again and getting a different perspective on perhaps the same problem is just, I would say, expand your base of knowledge, your foundation as much as you can.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. So I'm double majoring in bio and psych, and a couple semesters ago, actually, I took a higher level art history class, and it was quite interesting because I felt somewhat out of place in it, but it really like opened my horizon in a way. Like I really like found out more about art history. Like I talked to the other students in the class because obviously we would have a lot of discussions, and I learned about a different aspect of like of that industry specifically. Like I had no idea. And we even covered like specific technical skills in that class and like how somebody who might be an art historian or even somebody who might go into the fine arts, like kind of what job industries they would look into that I had no idea about. So it was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, and if you think about even like an art historian, like they imagine the amount of time that they spend doing research. And even if you go into a field that has nothing to do with art history, like that, those skills that you've developed to do the research might come in handy. Like for example, I work in professional billing. Typically it's finance folks, but there are art major like people who major in art, but they have those skills that translate. And anywhere you start, I feel like you're going to be a little lost at first. So like as long as you have those foundational skills, you're pretty much set.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. And how was the transition from school to working full time? And do you think BU prepared you for that transition? And if not, how would you recommend preparing for that transition?
Okay, I'm gonna answer this in two parts.
Hmm.
First, I'll be a little silly and say I was not prepared to go from college to like a typical work week. Um, just because I was so used to like napping between classes. And now you're at work and you know you have like your typical 9 to 5. We don't actually really work those hours, but we still work around those hours. And that was just like a little bit of a rude awakening. It's like, how do I fit in naps? Like, obviously, it's like a very minor inconvenience, but just like that adjustment of like in college, you have a lot of flexibility. You don't realize how much flexibility you have. And then in terms of like, do I think BU prepared me or college prepared me? Yes and no. I think again, I learned a lot. Like I think picked up a lot on like building relationships. Like I think college is like a lot more than just schoolwork. There's the social aspect. Do I think you need to spend a lot of money to go to a school and pick up those social skills and those soft skills? No. I will say I do think from what I've heard from my other peers is that I think Questrom does a very good job of preparing students for the job market, preparing them for interviews, for what a solid resume looks like, which I think, like as a student of Pardee and the College of General Studies, I don't think I had that same support. And maybe it was there and it just like wasn't made as obvious as it was. Because this was built into Question from what I understand. Um, so I think that just that like maybe this doesn't translate well into like BU preparing me for the actual day-to-day life as a working adult, but I think BU could have done a better job in helping students find jobs and prepare for like what it's like to interview, what it's like to prepare a resume um, that recruiters want to see.
No, yeah, I completely understand that. I feel like sometimes a lot of students might not also be aware of the resources that BU has to offer. So like here at the Center for Career Development, right? Like as a career ambassador, like I do help students with resumes and cover letters, but not a lot of people know that. So hopefully like through all this content and everything we're doing, like we'll try to promote it more. But I have heard definitely of Questrom having that built in. So obviously we're like a separate department, right? Obviously we're under BU, but it's not like built into Party or built in maybe even into CAS. Like I am in CAS, and once again, like I don't hear much about like oh maybe CAS specific workshops or um, cater towards like resume
Exactly.
or cover letter building. Although we might offer it as a university, like maybe certain departments might do it like better or might have that focus. And I was also gonna add on to like as you said like oh in college you're quite flexible. I totally agree. Like the fact that we have the freedom to even choose our own schedule, like
Right.
depending on the semester, in a way like we make our hours. Like we're like oh, okay I want a class in the morning or I want one in the
Right.
afternoon, depending on if you want a nap or not, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas at work it's like oh it's chosen for you. It's like you're gonna work from this time. You
Yeah,
don't.
and there's some flexibility, but again, it's like you like you have to operate, for me at least, like I have to operate during the times that we would expect like our billing offices to operate. I can't be like, oh, I'm gonna choose to work like at 7 p.m. because they're off at that time. If they have any questions, like I have to be there. And going back to what you said about uh, the career center, like I think BU could do a better job of highlighting the resources that it has. Um, for a CAS, like I don't get me wrong, I loved being a CAS student. I loved learning, and I think I excelled at being a full-time student. Um, I just think that it, at least for me, it was like career development and career prospects were very much an afterthought to my academics. So like I was mostly focused on like how do I get a good grade in this class? How do I um get a good grade on this test? As opposed to like, okay, what is the next step? Like there's more to life than just this test.
No, yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Um, and you talked about your major, which I mean, one of them, which was IR, and we kind of discussed how it can be considered quite broad. So it is a social science, unless you're maybe focusing on something specific, like becoming a diplomat. How did that affect your experience navigating the job search?
Yeah, I think, well, it definitely broadened my scope. I think that's the nice thing about being a social science major. Like tech, you could apply to a government job, you could go to graduate school, you could apply to finance. So I definitely think it broadened like the the scope of what I was looking for. Like I considered going into the foreign service or going into a government job. Um, but I don't think that it gave me a specific, it was both a good and a bad thing. Like it was broad enough that I had options, but not specific enough where I felt like I knew what the next step was.
No, yeah, and that makes total sense. I feel like, as we mentioned, with the humanities, like one of my majors is also psychology. It's like it's kind of a pro and a con in the sense like, okay, you learn a lot of transferable skills, you learn a lot of like teamwork skills, writing. Um, However, it could also be confusing because there's not like maybe a specific assigned role, especially if you're just also getting an undergraduate degree like in IR or an undergraduate degree in psychology. Whereas when you think of other majors, like as you mentioned earlier, computer science, oh, they're kind of what
Yeah,
field they're gonna go into. Or if like in Question, for example, things that might be more specialized, like oh, they're gonna be a financial analyst, like that's their job, like that's their
yeah.
specific role. Um, Whereas humanities, I feel like it's common to kind of see that, or like a lot of students struggle with the idea of um not having like a specific career path because it can be like scary in a sense.
Yeah, and at the same time, like I think that worked for me because I don't think I could have gone into college and said, you know, I'm this is what I'm going to do in the future. I'm therefore going to study computer science, like something that like yes, you technically have room to explore your career options as computer science, but it also is very limited in that you're most likely going to stick to either software development or something technical.
Yeah. We're gonna shift a bit to how you got your first job after college.
Yeah, so I remember I started applying for jobs like fall of senior semester. Was going through a lot of interviews, and was either talking to friends, trying to figure out like like people who had graduated from BU and seeing where they were working. It's also looking at LinkedIn, was looking at Handshake, and I actually found where the company that I'm currently at through Handshake. Like I got one of those ads that, you know, those promotions were like apply for Epic. And I was like, why not? I'm applying to all these different companies um and so I was like, you know, it was more of like an extra security. And it just worked out. And I'm kind of happy with the way it worked out.
No, yeah, definitely. I think sometimes, yeah, students forget about like these specific platforms like Handshake, which is really nice because it's kind of like, oh, specified for college students or universities. A lot of people just think of LinkedIn, but it is quite hard, I feel like, to find a job directly from LinkedIn. You might use it to like connect with other people, but or like
Right.
these like larger websites.
I was gonna say LinkedIn also, I think we forget that like often sometimes on for LinkedIn posts are looking for employees who have had experience, and Handshake I think is like you said geared more towards the college student. Because most likely we're not gonna have like 2.5 to 5 years of experience in that field.
And what are some of the steps to take after getting your first job out of college? And is it advantageous in your specific industry that you are in right now, maybe to start early, like the job search early, or is it maybe more beneficial to grow in that specific company?
Yeah, so for my role, I wouldn't say there's anything that you need to do to prepare for when you step in, for that first day. I know there's some careers where you have to be certified in um, some aspect of that job. Like I know people who are in finance who have to be certified or understand, have to take some sort of financial exam. I didn't have to do that. In terms of growth, or like what some people call like hopping around jobs. I personally am someone who I think I would want to at least get to 2 years within a company and then assess from there. Like, do I feel like one, this company's a right fit for me? Do I feel like I'm being appreciated for the work that I do for this company? And if I feel like the move is to stay or go, at least I have built enough experience within that company to know that like one, I know what to expect at a different company. I have um the the skills developed to market myself with. And if I choose to stay, like I've given myself that 2 years to really think about it, as opposed to just thinking about what's the next step. Should I leave? Should I go? Or should I leave? Should I stay? Not should I leave? Should I go?
No, that totally makes sense. I feel like sometimes a lot of people also struggle with the idea of like, oh, like I need to find a different position. I need to do better. Like I kind of need to go up in the ranks. Whereas sometimes it might just help to like stay in the same position, kind of evaluate it, learn more. And I feel like in those cases, sometimes you might even develop those skill sets even more and then apply that to maybe a different position and kind of, rise in that way. Um, so I'm going to shift a bit. Until now, we kind of talked about like your job experience, also your experience at BU. I'm gonna kind of start asking some networking questions. How did you begin networking and expanding your network?
I think you have to find like your little gateway person. Like we all have a friend. They're probably in Questrom. Um, they're a networking fiend, and you sort of find your in through that person. Um, Pick their brain, ask them like what they've done to network, like what are some tips that have worked for them, and it won't work immediately for you, and like networking can be awkward and a little anxiety inducing, but I would say like you're not going to get better at it unless you try, and unless, like, as cliche as it sounds and like as icky as it sounds, like you kind of have to like be in those uncomfortable situations, talk to people that you wouldn't really want to talk to sometimes, knowing that like at some point like this is going to pay off and you're going to get better at it. And like also you don't have to treat it as so transactional. Like I like to think of it like I'm just talking to this person and getting to know them, and like if they like me, like it may lead to an opportunity down the line. Like I don't have to be so focused on like I'm going to use this person to get like a high paying job.
No, yeah, definitely. And you kind of focused on maybe finding a person or those like personal connections when it comes to networking. Did you use maybe other resources that supported your networking journey? And could you share those?
Yeah, personally, I think I wasn't as prepared when it came to networking. Like everyone knows about LinkedIn. Um, and it's LinkedIn's a strange platform because I feel like we just add people and then we don't really, at least I never use it to really reach out. Like when I was applying for jobs, I would message people, but um I would really encourage students at BU who are thinking about their career to take advantage of any resource that they have, whether it's LinkedIn. I think that can be a little intimidating, but like you said, I don't think enough students know about the Career Center at BU, and I think that would be beneficial just to like begin thinking about what you should do. What are your next steps? I wish that like I had had some more of that structured support around me. I thankfully had a friend who was very good at networking and had a lot of experience um in uh in her industry, but I could see how a lot of other students who don't have that like that type of connection or would really benefit from having some sort of guidance.
Yeah, and what advice do you have for students looking to begin networking within their specific field? So, for example, you could either maybe talk about like IR or econ or even the current position that you're in. So, any tips regarding that?
Yeah, I would say leverage your immediate connections. Like for IR specifically, like it's a little hard because like when I think of government jobs, like they're not really being advertised like on LinkedIn or like maybe some of them are. But like your professors might have some insight onto where to look, and also they might have some of like their personal connections. Remember that a lot of like in IR at least, like these are people who have had experience in politics or in government and are now teaching, so they still have connections to some of those people from their previous career, and like a good word from them or just like them giving you someone's email could go a long way. So I would say like keep it simple. I think don't overwhelm yourself by like you have to talk to all these people. Like find the key resources here and there, and then don't psych yourself out because like you're going to find a job. It's going to happen. Don't put so much pressure on yourself because then like people can also read that. Like people know when you're being desperate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, especially when it comes to the professors. I feel like a lot of students might overlook that in a sense. They're like, oh, I know for a fact I did not talk to any of my professors like until my junior year, just because like obviously you're still getting situated, you're still kind of like getting to the rhythm of college and it might seem intimidating, but I've realized that a lot of professors are very, very open to helping. So they're quite they're very nice. They're not intimidating at all. They're obviously to teach. They are in education, so they definitely most of the time want to help. And I feel like it's a really nice way to kind of step into like networking because once again, you see them maybe 3 times a week. You're more familiar with them. Maybe you've participated in class, and it makes it easier to talk to them. You also have some type of like personal connection in a way because you're in their class. And I feel like it just makes it smoother to start, yeah, with who you know. And as you mentioned, with like a friend or somebody else you might be close to and kind of building off of that as well.
Yeah, and think about it. They're kind of like your reference or your someone who's referring you. So like they know you better than some random person at a company who just writes you down as a referral.
And you kind of talked about this, so the anxiety of networking, and some students find networking with people they don't know to be intimidating. And do you have any tips or maybe steps to overcome that fear?
Yeah, It's not the most insightful advice. It's just like with anything in life, I feel like the hardest part is just starting and it's taking that first step. But once you've started and you're starting to get a little bit of traction, like it's just easier to keep going. And like there's going to be awkward moments, but like trust me, you just have to keep going sometimes. And like not that you like have to be like a hamster on one of those wheels or whatever. Like it's okay to like take a break, reassess, and be like, what worked, what didn't work. And just being like compassionate enough to realize that like this is a work in progress. You're gonna be awkward. Um, but like in the end, you're gonna look back a few years later and be like, wow, one, I've come so far, and two, it's like I've accomplished so much.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And sometimes students come up to me also like in preparation of like career fairs that happen at BU, and they're quite anxious about it because they think going in like, oh, I'm gonna talk to this employer and I'm going to get a job. And sometimes it's kind of like, okay, that might be your end goal or what you desire, but it might be nice to even go to a career fair just to kind of see how it is, maybe walk around, maybe talk, maybe make it a goal like, oh, talk to one employer, especially if you're like intimidated or anxious about it. Talk to one person. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then maybe the next time you go to a career fair, you feel more comfortable networking and talking to employers that you've never seen before, because obviously it is quite intimidating when you've only maybe read about like 3 lines about their company on a website. You've never met this person before, you're trying to make an impression, and there's also a lot of people there. So I think it's definitely important maybe to even, as you said, like trial and error or like kind of exposing yourself to those situations. So
Yeah.
going, seeing how it works out, and then maybe next semester or like in a couple months, trying again, and definitely there will be improvement
Yeah,
as it comes to like all of these situations.
definitely. And I think like for people who are a bit more anxious, like it's useful to maybe have like a few talking points just ready. Like one, stuff about yourself that you think someone would want to hear about you that makes you seem like a very attractive employee. And two, like don't forget to like ask people about themselves and their company. Like people like to interact with curious people. And I think if you show that you're not only interested in them and in the company, it's like you're signaling to them that like you're someone who's willing to learn. And I think so much everyone focuses on just advertising themselves, which you have to do, obviously. But I think it's also very good to figure out one, is this a good fit for you, but also to signal to the other person that like you're there to listen as well.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes those like human or person to person interactions are overlooked in a sense. So it's like, oh, I'm going there with a clear goal. I'm gonna go there, introduce myself, show them my resume, tell them how qualified I am. And a lot of students kind of like focus only on that without realizing that maybe the employer has talked to also a million students that day, or like
Yeah.
if it's like we're talking about a career fair and maybe they're like, okay, like every student has come up to me and talked about themselves and have been trying to sell themselves, but maybe they'll think about a student that also asked them a question or was like more personable, even maybe funny or like charismatic. Maybe they'll think about them more than like the student that just kept on
Yeah.
maybe trying to sell themselves as well.
And not to keep going with this question, but like remember, like we're like BU's a pretty good school. Like there's a lot of people who on paper are very like attractive to employers, but like what sets you apart? And it's not necessarily, it might not necessarily be a grade or a club that you're the president of, but it could just be like not to be able to say that you're a personality hire, but it could be your personality. Like you might just be the right fit for that company culture.
That's very valuable advice. Do you think you have any other pieces of advice you'd like to share about your journey or anything else?
Yeah, and I would say this is more applicable to like when you start working. Um like don't expect to know everything and like and in fact I would say like expect to feel very uncomfortable Like I'm almost 7 months into my job, and it's only now that I feel like I'm starting to like understand what my role is and like the help and like what my job entails. And still, it's like it's still confusing, especially in my field. Like, not only am I having to like learn finance jargon and medical jargon and software jargon, um, but like you're learning just like stuff about the company itself and what it's like to work there, and give yourself the grace to like learn, gradually grow. You're not going to like be the expert in one night or one year. Um, and just make sure to reflect on like your progress as you go, because I think it can get a little disheartening when you're like, I'm so confused every day. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know what benefit I'm providing to like my company. But when you look back, sometimes like just a week ago, and you're like, I know more than I did a week ago, and like just that alone, I think, can be very um motivating.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this chat and all the insight that you gave. Um, yeah, thank you.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Enva.